just in the room, the full room with all the attendees, going over what is a pretty important topic, and that's how header bidding has impacted transparency and how this industry is evolving. We had a pretty spirited discussion, and from many people in the room contributed. What would you say was the kind of main takeaway from that?
I thought it was great. I mean, I think header bidding is a technology solution, so that was kind of clear in the room. But at the same time, there's a huge business story here, right? Like, who are the players? Are we being transparent? Do we know what's going on with fees? Do we not know what's going on? So I thought it was a great discussion, because that's really what we should be thinking about, right? How does tech work? And then how does our business run based on that tech?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we had folks from the publisher side and the agency side, DSPs, talking about fee transparency and how how header bidding has brought some of that to life, and also about how technology maybe should be more like technology and should be charged for that way. So we had a pretty spirited debate, what I think one of the outcomes was everybody kind of thinking that this is something we should be continuing to talk about.
Right.
Whereas it's something that is kind of topical and in the moment, but is not necessarily something that's completely out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we moved the ball forward a little bit today. This is a long race. There's a lot more work to be done. But the things I felt that came out was that at least everyone knew what header bidding was. If we had did that discussion a year ago, there probably would have been some questions about what it was. And then it led to, I think, like a real theme for today, which is about getting to transparency and how to run these businesses. And the thing, that's sort of what makes our industry exciting, right? Models are changing all the time. Innovation is happening. Some of it's controversial, but I think it ultimately leads us to a good place. As a publisher, I would just say that we've been in the header bidding space for a while. I view it as a step towards a more perfect auction, not the perfect auction, but better than what we might have had if we hadn't done it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we kept on coming back to in the conversation was, as much as we're talking about things that might be difficult, and how earlier in the day we were talking a little bit of doom and gloom about how we need to change, that the programmatic industry is still extremely vibrant. I think the number that was quoted this morning was 84% of dollars are transacted programmatically. That's obviously, that doesn't mean that there's this massive system failure that things need to change tomorrow.
Yeah.
But what we also talked about is that even if we wanted things to change tomorrow, that there's plenty of kind of headwind against that. How do you think that kind of bore itself in the conversation?
I thought it was great. I mean, I think Michael Barrett's discussion earlier was a really nice kind of like even-handed look at what's going on. On the one hand, publishers, we need ad revenue to sustain operations and make great content, whether that's a weather forecast or your sports highlight or important world news. Publishers depend on ad revenue, so we need that to happen. And at the same time, we're not there yet, right? We haven't created that perfect auction. Everyone likes the principles, everyone likes the ideas. The devil's in the details, and I think there's still more work to be done, but I was glad to hear some point of view that, hey, programmatic has actually grown ad revenue for a lot of publishers, right? Like sometimes that gets lost in this whole discussion, so I was glad to hear that come out.
Definitely, and I think one of the points that Jeremy brought up towards the end of our conversation as it was wrapping up was that when Mark Pritchard spoke in January, he pointed out that there's kind of culpability on all sides.
Right.
And what Jeremy had mentioned is kind of maybe everybody should read their contracts a bit more, right, and do some math. Yeah. So, I
oversimplify things. That's my, I'm guilty.
So I'm going to even further oversimplify and say that if we all read more, we all do math, and apparently drink less rosé, because that came up in the fee structure conversation, I think the industry will continue on the path that we have, and even kind of take off even further.
Nothing to add to that. It's perfect.
I think that's it.